Kadhja, thanks for
Hi.
joining. Thanks for joining me. This is kind of awesome. We actually have never spoken like face to face like
I
this.
know. It's
Amazingly.
great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking some time out. I know we're all busy, and it means a lot just to set aside a little time to chat. And it's especially cool because it's just kind of another excuse to connect with you and actually, frankly, just like learn more about you. I think our collaboration was awesome, but we didn't really get to, hang out together like we normally would,
Right.
in a very different world and different reality. So this is kind of an excuse to do that. So first, what I want to say. I think I've said a version of this to you before, but particularly as it relates to the creative voice, I wanted to say that my initial impression of your music was I remember exactly where I was. I was actually in the car, but I remember exactly where I was driving, exactly sort of the feeling that came over me when I first heard your music, and which I think is telling. And I think one of the reasons it struck me so much is that you're. I remember thinking like this person is making music on their own terms, and he was coming out of my speakers like. Coming out of the blue in that sense, because it wasn't a version of something that I'd heard before, and I think that's like so amazing. That's for me. That's like such a high goal, and it's maturity is not the right word because I think that maybe. Because of what it implies of about like maybe a naivete, which but there was this like kind of a fully formed creative identity that was coming out at me out of the speakers, and I wonder, do you feel that way about yourself?
I feel like it's always changing. So in that way, it doesn't ever feel like it's like fully formed or finished because like your taste is constantly evolving. And, when I look back at old records, I'm like, oh, I would have done that differently or whatever the case. But I think in the moment of making them, I try and be as honest with myself as possible of like what my taste is in this moment and like only keeping things that feel like good for me now. So
Yeah.
yes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you feel deferential to others, to peers, your ancestors, the marketplace?
I might if I knew what that word meant.
Oh, like do you
But I
feel like
don't.
you do you feel like you have to defer or you have to like take in outside information and outside influences, have to / want to, in the process of making a record, or do you feel like you're subservient only to your like creative whims?
I like that question because I think so when I made my last record, which is crazy to think that already came out 3 years ago, but when I was making that record, I stopped listening to everything for like the year that I was making the record.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I had consumed so much already, and I was just kind of sorting and like
Yeah.
digesting.
Yeah.
And I wanted to like clear space in my head to like let organic things bubble up without like constantly putting more in. And I enjoyed that process, but after I had stopped listening to music so long, it was like a habit at that point, and it was hard to get back into listening to music. And I realized that I had kind of like run out of like I had digested everything, and I needed to start consuming again. So I think, yeah, definitely it's important for me to like, have all of those influences and references. And that's part of part of like what your inspiration comes from, and your understanding of music. And and you have to keep feeding your taste.
Yeah. So speaking of restarting, you are a parent now, which is new since your latest record, which was Childqueen. And I'm wondering if you, and if this is too personal, you can say, you know, you don't have to answer it, but I'm wondering if you feel like you're now in the process at all of figuring out who you are again, or if there's any sort of difficulty in restarting, quote unquote. I'm not implying that you've stopped, but I'm just saying there's clearly a new chapter logistically. I mean, I'm a parent as well, so
Yeah.
I guess I'm bringing a lot of my own to this question, but my own experience. But I'm curious where your headspace is now, and if being a parent is how that's going.
Yeah, I absolutely have no idea who I am now. And and it's really interesting because I don't fit into like all the same, I mean, on a physical level, but also on like on an emotional level, on like any level, I don't fit into the music and the you know, even the personality in life that I had before I was a parent. It's all changed. And so I feel like it's a good place to be, in that, like, you know, there's infinite options of where you can go, like where you would redirect yourself. But it's also really scary. And it's also, you know, like when you haven't made music on your own terms for so long and you try and get back into it, you're like, oh, I don't know if I like anything. Like, I don't
Right.
It's hard to figure out. Yeah, it's hard to figure out what you want to make again.
Right. Let alone like actually have time and energy for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the time and energy for it, a lot of times it's like, what do I say now? Like, even the stories I would tell are different now. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me being a parent, like becoming a parent, was, you know, all those things that people say, like there's this, you know, spiritual and emotional ascent, and things are, you know, priorities are reframed and all that stuff. But for me, the thing that's been most definitive in defining sort of my creative, redefining myself creatively, is just the logistical constraints of like having time to dwell in your, like, to have personal time, to have like headspace, like physical energy, backed up by sleep,
Right.
which like for me stopped happening for over a year. But I think, I mean, I'm certainly, I'm not complaining, but I'm just saying, like, more so than like the sort of philosophical and spiritual like turmoil and beauty of it all. It was just like time of day, you know, like air in my lungs, energy in my muscles, you know. But I do think because of that though, and I'm curious if you have a similar experience. I think it actually was definitely healthy for me in some ways, in that it was clarifying. Like you said, like, I don't really even know who I am anymore. And I think it's probably because, like, you're asking yourself, in addition to all the emotional stuff, you're asking yourself, like, well, in the amount of time that I have, the energy that I have, and that my like prioritization of energy and all that stuff, what is my, like for me, it's like, what do I really want to do?
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're single, or when you're married or childless, like, it's like your whole life is like, it just like, it feels now, at least in retrospect, you feel like you have so much more freedom, and you don't have to be so precious about every hour. But now, like, you like, for this, you had to line up childcare. Like, I can have this conversation because my wife's going to do pickup for, you know, Remy's, you know, it's like, do you have that feeling that, like, now you actually feel more precious about it, or is it, have you actually kind of like lost some energy for it and some passion for it?
No, I haven't lost passion for it, but I have like definitely put it off. I think
Yeah.
I've just decided that like this chapter, I can't afford to be precious about the next record I put out necessarily, and to find like a new way of working and a much more collaborative way of working, because it's a much more like streamlined process. And then,
Mhm.
but I still have like, little buckets of different projects. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to have to wait a year before I get into this project, because I really need the time to like,
Mm. Yeah.
and I think that's one thing that that I at least took for granted before I had a kid, was how much time it takes to like the pre-work time of just like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sitting
Yeah.
and doing nothing in the studio, and like
Yeah.
maybe hour
Totally.
4 or 5 you get an idea.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And
It's
so
like it's like the 1 a.m. idea where that's the actual idea you need to start moving toward.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Not
exactly.
like the 5 p.m. idea that you only have time to squeeze in before dinner.
Yeah.
Like, um,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's
So now I'm just like, it's interesting because, I still have been able to do some creative things. It just, you have to like really change your mindset of how you create stuff, because you can't just sit around for 4 or 5 hours anymore.
no, yeah, yeah.
You just like start chasing something. You're like, all right, let's just go. Let's just chase this. Where is this
Is
going?
Now, is that why you mentioned collaboration? Because you feel like other people can catalyze your activity and sort of like keep you in motion?
Yeah, or I just feel like now, if I have a project or a song that I'm working on, I'll delegate a lot more now. I'll be like, okay, this is the song,
Yeah,
I've written the chords and everything, and I'll just like I'll Zoom, because we're obviously in COVID times. I'll like
yeah,
Zoom a musician friend, and we'll like
yeah,
knock it
yeah, yeah,
out. And yeah, and before I used to just be able to tinker, and I'm like, okay, I'm not
yeah,
tinkering now. I'm
yeah.
going for it.
I've read that you've described yourself previously as a control freak. So I'm wondering, is it hard to feel like to welcome other people into the process now? Or are you kind of just like, or is you being a sort of control freak because you're in addition to being a songwriter, you are a multi-instrumentalist. You're playing all this stuff. You're singing all this stuff. You're arranging all this stuff. You're producing all this stuff. You I know historically you haven't engineered as much, but you're pretty much doing it all. So is
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've been engineering myself. Yeah, but
more as well.
yeah, I think.
I read in an early interview that was something you weren't doing as much, but that was an
Oh
early
yeah, maybe
interview.
years ago, but it's been.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been.
okay,
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of it.
cool.
What was the question
So
again?
the question was like, is it hard to let go of that? Like, because you're
Oh
like
yeah, actually, I'm really welcoming it this time around.
nice.
It's really fun for me. Yeah, I think the reason why I've been a control freak is because I love to do things.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like it's fun for
totally.
me to figure it out on my own, and like it was like I would be depriving myself of some enjoyment of like figuring out this bass line or whatever it is. So but now that I don't have as much time, I'm just like really enjoying everybody's flavors and everybody's yeah, I'm loving it. It's
Yeah,
really fun.
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, you've actually had some amazing collaborations, some really high profile ones. Do you feel like in the process of like so for me again I'll just project my own like experience.
Yeah.
For me, one of the most definitive things for me was writing music for dance.
Mm.
Early on, I met my wife when we were 19, and she got me into writing music for dance. And it's basically something I never stopped doing. And early on, before the Son Lux project began, and as it was developing, writing music for dance was like a huge part of like where I was able to sort of discover myself, my own creative voice, things that I that I was gravitating toward, and also kind of like developing a process whereby I could react to outside information, to limitations, you know, or information coming from another medium. I'm curious if like you found that in collaboration is where you like learn more about yourself, or is that kind of like a separate thing where you do you there, and then where you really learn about yourself and refine your creative voice is in those like sacred solo times?
I feel like I would say more of the latter of, but that's because of the incubation period of like when you're working on your own projects, which sometimes when you're collaborating with people, I mean, during COVID times is different, but like if you're ever like in the same room as people collaborating, it always feels like there's this pressure to like write something quickly. And I think because of that, I tend to like prefer the time and space to like really marinate on things, and I get that when I'm working alone. Like no one's sitting there like waiting for something brilliant to come out. You know?
Yeah. Oh, that's so tough.
Yeah.
But so has there been an example where maybe that that's an exception to that, like where you found yourself like working on a track and you really learned something about something you could do, like where it kind of put you. The reason why I'm asking is because for me, I relish limitation, like having like little like impositions of, and so I often kind of come up with little rules for myself, or just like I'm pretty geeky when it comes to like how I'm very intuitive and responsive and like emotional about how the path of something moves forward creatively, but I really geek out about like starting with something that's like quite like academic or theoretical.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, again, that experience of working with other people where I'm sort of like confronted with something that didn't come out of my own brain, and then I'm having to like respond, and it's kind of like having to figure out your way around a city without a map. Yeah. And then you work on like these different skills in that you develop a different kind of navigation that way. And I'm wondering if there's been an exception to the rule for you where you've really discovered something cool about yourself, like in the process of collaboration, something that maybe you could carry forward into your own work.
Yeah, I don't know about myself as much as about music, but I would say like when I was working with Anderson .Paak on a lot of string arrangements, like I think I ended up doing like 13. I think he only kept maybe 6. But yeah, I was doing all these string arrangements, and those were some of my like favorite things I've ever done. And it was exactly awesome. for why you say it was like I didn't write this song, so I get to like really play and explore like a new style of arrangement, and it was really fun.
Oh man, that's awesome to hear. Because I absolutely love your arranging, and to know that's like something that you also are getting a lot out of for other people. That's really amazing. That's one of the things when I first encountered your music. I was a little perplexed by the arrangements, so which made me like listen harder, you know. And I think that's another thing I listen for in music is being kind of like surprised. And it doesn't happen very often, so it really stood out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I read that you began sort of your path into like your early adulthood thinking you were going to study film. You went to USC, found it prescriptive and kind of formulaic, and it was just not, your heart wasn't in it. It wasn't a right fit. I'm curious, and then you really shifted gears. I'm curious if you still feel somewhere an urge to be a filmmaker, maybe like on your own terms.
Absolutely. And actually this year, while I wasn't able to make as much music as before, it was easier to kind of start doing like little film writings, because I think in for one reason, like it doesn't require nearly as much setup and quiet as music does. You know what I mean? Like my baby can
Yeah.
be screaming in the other room and I can still
Right.
write. But
Yeah, totally.
and also because I haven't been thinking about it as much. So it's like, you know, like when you've been thinking about music so much, sometimes like every idea feels stale. You're not as like inspired or motivated. But with new hobbies, I always tell people to get a new hobby. With new hobbies, you're just so like enchanted by the newness of it, that everything is fun and exciting, and you can chase ideas much further, and you have all this momentum. So this year I've been working on film and TV projects a lot more with the hope of developing them. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Um, you know, it's I actually give a version of this like when I ask about like advice. I think advice is tricky because um it's so situational and personal.
Yeah.
And I realized something. I have like a default answer about some when it like comes to like writer's block, and I realized in listening to you respond to that I need to modify my piece of advice, because I am not like you in that I honestly have no interest in anything else. I'm like an obsessive in the way that you're obsessive, probably, but like definitely I really don't have any interest in any other art forms. And you're a visual artist. You're if not a filmmaker, you're on that path, and it's in your heart. And you're this amazing writer and producer. For
I
me,
wouldn't call myself a visual artist. I just have to assert that.
well,
Sorry, keep going.
you do your own. You've done your own artwork
I
for
like
your
to do
albums.
It's fun, but like no one's gonna put it in a museum. But it's fun. I like doodling a lot.
Well, at least you have a visual. You clearly have a visual storytelling like urge.
Yeah, for sure.
And side of who you are, who your creative, what your creative voice is. Your creative voice isn't limited to music, and I actually think that mine is. I want to compartmentalize my life differently. I want to like start crafting my day and thinking about the mundane things as part of the art of my life as well. But but in less lofty terms, I do feel like when it comes to like my creative voice, it's really just limited to music. And the advice I usually give to folks, is like, don't work on one thing, because when the energy dies, your passion for that whole thing wanes, the whole medium or whatever, the whole like making music in general. I can't I'm obsessed with this beat. I used to think it was great. Now I think it sucks. I'm having trouble feeling inspired. I was like, I've been working on it for 2 weeks, and it's like, I think I like it less than I started. And, you get down on yourself. Or this song, it's like not coming together. There was a spark late at night. That one night it felt so special. And now that I'm like listening to it play back, I'm like, if you've got one thing, it's so easy to just get like stumped. But if the more things you have, the more you can just be like, okay, no energy for this now. I'm going to shift the dial. I'm going to go to a new thing. Nope, no energy for that. Shift the dial, go to the next thing. Oh, yeah, I've got energy for this. And then you discover something in the process of working on that. And then it's like, boom, light bulbs go off for like the other things, like you can take that energy and that feeling of like mystical inspiration, and you can start to apply it to other places, and you can kind of keep the cycle going. I've given that advice too many times without mentioning that this might not just be a music thing. I see it through my lens, but the way you described it is, I think, super helpful, and I'm going to definitely amend my way of thinking. Find hobbies, find other places outside of music even where you can like really devote your energy and stay creative, but kind of like keep cycling. So thanks for that. That's pretty awesome.
Thanks.
Do you find it's easier to be yourself on stage or in the studio?
Oh, in the studio, 100%. I've never been myself on stage once. I am not.
I know that feeling so deeply.
I am an introvert 100%. So performing is really hard for me. It's like, I don't know, you can develop some calluses so that it doesn't like, traumatize you as much, but it's like in my heart I'm still an introvert. It's really hard to just like let go. And I would love to be able to do that. I love people who are performers. Like I love watching a performer, and that was one thing I learned from working with Anderson .Paak as well, is like he is a performer.
Yeah.
And it was honestly through like that comparison that I was like, oh, I'm not a performer.
Yeah.
I like working in the studio, and that's like, a lot of people can do both, but for me, my dream career is very few performances. My dream career is a lot of studio time and not that much performing.
Yeah. Do you but at the same time you said did you say you would love to like be a performer? Like meaning
I would love to be a different person. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
No, I'm being real though. I mean, like,
yeah, no, it's good. No, it's good. It's good. So, do you think it's possible?
I don't know. I don't know. I think if I found a way of being just immaculately rehearsed with a lot of other elements that are there to attract your attention other than me, then that could be a fun performance for me. Like I've never had like the big budgets for performance where I could like have cool light shows and choreography or whatever. Yeah. And I think maybe if I was a small part of the performance, then I would feel like I was okay to take up the amount of space that I take. But I always end up feeling like I'm supposed to be bigger, like I'm supposed to be taking up more space on the stage, and I'm just like sitting there like
yeah. I can relate to that. One of the things that was like one of the biggest sort of personal revelations I had with respect to music is that I could be a performer in a way that feels truly me, and where I feel at home in my own skin, because that was something that wasn't true for me for a long time, and it changed when I met Rafiq and Ian. And that's one of the main reasons why, which is a selfish reason, I guess, that Son Lux became a band. And it was always a solo project, and then it was worth redefining the whole definition of the project around this chemistry, because I felt it was such compelling evidence of something good and fruitful that after 30 years of making music and feeling like totally uncomfortable as a performer, suddenly in the context of these guys making music together on stage, I felt like I could be I didn't feel that anymore. I felt like, oh, I can be myself in both places and be for the first time comfortable on stage. And I had a lot to learn, but it wasn't like, and I still of course have a lot to learn, but I felt like rather than feeling pessimistic about that, like, oh, I have so much to learn, it's like I felt optimistic. Oh, I have so much to learn. Like I can get better at this. I can do this.
Yeah.
So, and I think you said if I could be if it could just be like if I could be a small part of a bigger thing. I think that's part of why it worked for me, is because for the first time I felt like I had a band that was stealing the show, and I could sit back inside of the music and be a part of something bigger than myself. And these guys each doing a better version of the thing that I could imagine. And then it was like, oh, freedom, on stage.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
really, really, really awesome. So I hope that for you. If that's something that you want, I definitely hope that for you.
Thank you. I hadn't really thought about it that much before. I just was like, oh, I'm bad at this. But, I don't spend as much time on stage as I do in the studio. So
yeah.
And you forget that there was a long period of time where it was really uncomfortable to be in the studio because I didn't know what I was doing. So, maybe you're right. Maybe, maybe there's a time and a place for my performance, but
yeah, that's a good point.
I'm enjoying reimagining like my, artist brand right now. Because like you said, we're in a different place now. And
yeah,
I want to, I saw a Joni Mitchell quote recently, or I was watching her interviewed, and she was saying how she has to defend her humanness against like, the artist branding as much as she can. And that's how I feel now. Where like I don't want to put anything on. I don't want any convolution. I just want to be able to like be my introverted self, and that be an acceptable part of the brand, because it's hard to like continuously fake confidence or fake coolness or cuteness or whatever. Like I don't want to do it anymore. I don't have time to do it. I just want to roll up like me and it be okay.
yeah. And do you feel, two questions, one's maybe easier than the other. Well, they're probably both difficult, but do you feel like you regret or at some point may regret using your name, your given name, as your artist name?
Oh yeah, that was a big mistake. That was I think I started regretting that already like 3 years ago. I was like, because there's no separation from who you are as a person from what you want to create, and you want to be able to have the freedom to evolve however you want to evolve in as a person or as a musician,
Yeah.
So it's hard that you can't separate them.
Yeah. I'm like, it's one of the things I'm really thankful that I did when I started the Son Lux project. I just had this, first of all, I was a lot younger. I, practically speaking, began the Son Lux project in 2004, and I was still in such a process of discovery, and but I was like so interested in so many different kinds of music, and to some extent, the Son Lux project was at its core about reconciling opposites and pulling in feelings that seemed divergent, sounds that seemed divergent, concepts that seemed divergent, and finding mercurial, beautiful marriages of those things. But there was no way that Son Lux, or there's no way that whatever I was about to do was going to like completely house all of my creative urges. And I wanted this freedom for Ryan Lott to be like whoever Ryan Lott wanted to be like moving forward. But I also wanted the freedom to like, similarly, I wanted the freedom for this project that I was doing to have its own life, and now that it's become a band, I'm sort of doubly thankful, because like I don't really know that it would have felt the same with Rafik and Ian. I mean, if Ryan Lott is not a band, like, but Son Lux is a band. You know what I mean? It can be because of that. So sorry if that question made you sad.
Oh no. I almost feel like the same way I do about tattoos, where like I would have gotten one if I could have thought of a cool one, but I just never thought of a good stage name.
That's totally me in tattoos also. I've at various points in my life imagined that the older version of myself was going to have a tattoo, and now I'm like definitely in a place where I'm like, oh, it makes a lot more sense for the younger version of myself to have a tattoo.
Yeah.
Well, so you also have you have this collaboration I read about, Genesee. Is that still a thing?
Oh no, you reading some old articles? Yeah.
Trying to do my research, girl.
You are. But,
I'm glad that I couldn't really find anything, so I'm glad that that wasn't a like, oh yeah, we're working so hard on that, and I'm like, didn't really have any evidence for it, but
No. We put out like 2 songs and
right,
it
yeah,
didn't. Yes.
yeah.
I would suggest to everyone, don't start a band with someone you're dating. Don't do it. Do something else.
What about start a marriage with someone in your band, or start a dating relationship with someone in your band? Just don't do it all together. Or
I've never done it, but
okay. Well, then you don't have to speak. You don't have to speak about it. I also I think I don't want to also get you in trouble. So, what is so do you think? Can you imagine yourself finding a home as a smaller part of a larger mechanism, more not just in your arranging and not in your features and stuff like that, but sort of like, basically, could you imagine at this point, like starting a band or becoming a part of a band, someone else's project, or some sort of serious collaborative project?
The collaborations that I'm really interested in at the moment are like film scores, and like I want to move into that direction of kind of collaborating with like a director and that type of a team. I would not say never. I would not say I would never like be part of a band, but I think it would be really hard for me to negotiate my tastes with other people.
Yeah.
Like I tend to either be like, it's gonna be this way, or I'm like, I don't know, don't ask me. So like I don't really know the in between. I don't know how to like give and take.
Yeah. I'm learning that now because I'm now producing other artists more. It's something I never did, and I'm learning that too, because that's where you have to live. You have to live in that sort of tension of like, it's totally got to be this way, and then if that's not acceptable, then like really having energy for another approach, rather than being like, oh, I don't know, like you don't have the leisure of saying, oh, I don't know, because you're producing, but you also like you also need to like have your voice, but then you also have to be like, oh, well, that's not what's wanted, or that's not, the artist isn't, it's not life-giving, so like let's find another approach. Finding a different version of me that's still true has been tricky.
Yeah.
You mentioned scoring, and you also over email recently expressed some frustration over deadlines. Are you at liberty to talk about any of these deadlines, or are they related to film scoring, or what are you working on now? That
this week I've been working on a theme song for a podcast, which has been really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I've just been taking on like different random stuff, which is I think partially because I'm putting off working on my own record. But also I've learned so much by taking on random side jobs. So it's not a bad thing, especially while I'm like trying to reacquaint myself with my work, my relationship with my work. It's been really good. Yeah,
that's great. That's awesome. I tried to do a podcast once. Did a theme for it, and it was actually kind of a crazy story. I was driving the car. We were in LA at the time. Jen was in the back seat because Remy was a baby at the time, and she was like helping him back there. I was driving around, and the phone rings, and I answer it through the car, and it's Ira Glass.
Oh, tight.
And I'm like, this is one of those situations where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad my wife is in the car. Because, it's like you have this desire to like look good in front of her, obviously. And like, she loves Ira Glass,
Yeah.
So like, and it's like Ira Glass's voice coming through my, coming through my car speakers. And it's like, And he called me because he was interested in me, like, demoing for this thing that he was working on, and I didn't get the job, but
isn't that always the case?
But I think it's okay. I mean, it's like I always honestly, I think the way it worked out, it went on to be a podcast that like lots of people loved, and I think it was awesome because I actually listened to it, of course, to a rough version of it, to get in the right headspace, but. I've actually found more often than not the gigs that I have not gotten, I'm like, I look back and it just feels like I dodged a bullet.
Oh man, I don't feel that way at all.
Really? I feel thankful.
So sad. Because... I'm still sad.
You're still sad about what?
I'm the one that I'm gonna be forever sad about.
Okay. Yeah.
It was I got called to do a demo for Space Jam 2. And but honestly, this was like a very different version of the script. At that point, it was like more of a musical. So it was like it was going to be like a song, like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're actually
on camera,
not
on camera.
A score.
Yeah.
I forgot what that's called. Like diegetic.
Diegetic. Yeah.
So anyway, they like, obviously they didn't even go in that direction, but I'll still forever be bummed. The song is tight, by the way. Sometime I'm gonna put it out.
Okay, so that's what I was gonna. So that's what I was gonna say. Is it like one of the reasons why that I dodged, like I feel like I often dodged a bullet, is not really because it was that I look in retrospect or I monitor the progress of that project, and I'm like, oh, that turned out terrible, or I heard it was a mess. But it's more because I just feel like I've gotten this trove of tools and things from trying and failing that I can just then take somewhere else and do like a new pass at it, and it like becomes even better. And it's like, there's so many times where I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I didn't win that job. I didn't sell that track or whatever, because now it's like I can make it what I want it to be, no matter what. Like it's not about what the job is, whatever. And then like watch something new bloom from it. And the scoring, the like bespoke music thing, like writing music for like particular jobs and stuff. I've always, not always, but I'm in a place now where, and I've been in a place for a little while now where it's like I really relish the opportunity. Even if I don't get the gig. I did spend years doing ads full time. From 2007 to 2011, I was, in addition to developing the Son Lux project, I worked at a music house in New York, and I was an in-house composer, and I was writing, recording, mixing, laying back to picture, the whole works, like 2 to 6 pieces of music a day.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. Those dudes who do that, it's such a hard job. I mean, I did it. And I'm thankful that I had that gig, because I never could impose that kind of like frequency and intensity on myself without someone paying me for it, and like dangling the carrot of commission in front of me. So, and I think at that time in my life, I was able to do, we just had a dog and I could walk to work. We lived in the East Village. It was like super chill, walk to Soho in the morning. And I could put up with it and still do, and, come in weekends, into the studio on weekends and at night and stuff. But it was such a hard job. But I'm thankful for it, because I feel like I learned a ton about myself, and about what I was capable of doing that I otherwise wouldn't have discovered. And I also learned to appreciate music that I had until then really looked down on, frankly. I was like really snobby about, because I grew up like classical music kid and it got into jazz and stuff, but I wasn't really like, I didn't consume pop music of the day in the way that like it seemed like everyone around me was. I was just like really decoupled from that. And just like anything that's unfamiliar to you, it's like it's easier to sort of dismiss it and look down on it, especially if you think you do a better version of it. And that was totally me. And I remember one of the first jobs I did was like, we were trying to like rip off or like emulate an AC/DC track. And I thought I knew what AC/DC sound like just like through like osmosis, you know, just like culturally absorbing it over my life. And so I just started recording and got out a guitar, like did some licks, programmed some drums or whatever. Producer comes in, like, yeah, doesn't really sound like AC/DC. I'm like, really? Yeah, it does. And I'm thinking, yeah, it does. It's like 5 chords and it's like, you know, simple and just, you know, rock. And he's like, let's pull up some AC/DC, you know? And so I pull up some AC/DC and like, and first thing I never really listened to AC/DC on like big old Genelecs and like in the way that I listened to my own music thinking it's so great. And here I'm listening, we like put it on and like, damn, it sounded amazing. It was like mixed, like the kick had so much like so thick and it was like, and everything just punched so hard and it's so much intensity and the guitars were so wide and like everything felt like it was so full of visceral energy. And then we listened to my track and it was like, oh my God, it was like embarrassing, you know? And here I was thinking like I did it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I spent 4 years basically getting schooled by music that I just like had not really appreciated before. Definitely glad I'm not ripping off AC/DC on the daily anymore, but I think it was really valuable for me just to like discover who I wanted to be and who I was and what I could be. Not so limiting. Okay, last question because I spent most of the time talking. I apologize for that.
No, I'm enjoying hearing these stories. It sounds like such a crazy musical education.
Yeah, I think reading up on you, like I think we had some similarities. You started classical. You kind of grew up with classical violin, and it wasn't really until a friend let you borrow a guitar that you started to that you sort of turned over like or discovered something about yourself and started writing songs. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, because music was as a kid like a chore. I really didn't have any appreciation for it. Like I wasn't allowed to listen to music that I wanted to listen to. I was only allowed to listen to classical music, and then I would do the chore of practicing. You know, every day. My dad was pretty strict about it. So when I started, you know, playing guitar and teaching myself, reacquainting myself with music and starting to like actually go listen to records because I hadn't really even done that. And I realized that there was so much more opportunity in music for expression than in other things that I was working in at the time. And yeah, and I just didn't understand that I could have that relationship with music because I had such a resentful relationship with it my whole life. So yeah.
That's awesome. My last question you just answered, which was like, have you ever surprised yourself in a big way musically? And you just sounds like you just answered that question.
Yeah, you know, I think I tend to kind of swing back and forth on this pendulum of like feeling like I know how to do what I do, and then I'll swing to the other side of it and be like, I don't know what I'm doing at all. I need to go to school immediately. I need to, which I still feel every day. I'm like, I should definitely go to grad school or something. But anyway. And so I surprise myself sometimes when I'm like in those moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing at all. Why did I think I could do this career? And then, like you said earlier, when you start working within limitations and it starts unlocking things for you, and you're like, oh, like you have to like, you know, get to know it again, get to know music again. And then I'm like, okay, it's not that bad.
Yeah, and get to know yourself, that you're capable of things that you just hadn't thought of yourself doing before, which I think is a big one too. Just allowing space for your future self.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and like you, I love limitations. I loved deciding that I'm only gonna use these chords, or I'm only gonna, and then just seeing what happens. I love that.
Or this would be totally Kadhja thing, like, oh, I'm only gonna express these chords with the contour of my voice and a bass, or I'm only gonna use like four flutes, and then like everything, all the information is gonna be right there for those like 14 bars or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love the discipline that you exert in your arrangements and production style, and it's one of the things that I listen to your music for, as like when I'm like, okay, what, like you and I, we have very different aesthetic approaches in some ways, and like but you're like, you have some, there's some things that about your music that feel very like out of they feel like something that I want to attain to, but I never feel like I'm in the situation to do it. And so I often when I listen to your stuff, it partly to like kind of shock my own system, because you and I are so different in some way, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I actually don't listen to much music that I feel like sounds like the music that I make. So, and I think that's part of the reason why it's like I want to be surprised. I want to be challenged. I want to be like by something that's really well done and really that's like so intentional and crafted. And so, I think you definitely have a regular place in my listening. Again, I just we'll leave it there. But thank you so much for spending so much time with us, Kadhja.
Thank you.
And I got a lot out of this. I hope you did too. But and I know I think people will love hearing what you've had to say. So yeah, thanks again for making time, and blessings on your family. I hope for tons of health and safety and just like peace of mind in this time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay. Have a beautiful night.